A cold New York night, the sound of crushing metal tearing through the heavy rain, drowning everything in a haunting silence. Arthur screams in a blind rage, his eyes filled with hate as he glares at the poor Uber driver, then slams a stack of wet bills into the filthy mud. Take this money and vanish right now. Do not make me use far more ruthless ways. Mia slowly steps forward, her legs trembling but her feet firm as she treads directly onto the luxury dollar bills. She looks up at the arrogant billionaire, her voice choking with fury yet filled with pride. You think money can buy a human soul? You almost killed someone, you cold-blooded monster. Slap. A stinging strike echoes. That day, Arthur had no idea that this single blow was the beginning of a billion-dollar empire's total collapse. When everything is gone, will money still be the measure to save a lost soul? Do not look away, because this is the lesson in humanity that Wall Street never taught you. The street lights blur into a messy haze as Arthur pushes the gas pedal of his Bentley, flying through the Manhattan night like a god who owns the world. Suddenly, a sharp scream of tires tears through the air. The luxury car spins and slams hard into the back of Mia's old sedan while she waits at a red light. White smoke rises from the hood, and the smell of burnt rubber mixes with the cold rain hitting the street. Arthur climbs out of his car, stumbling, the heavy smell of alcohol following him. He doesn't ask if she is okay. Instead, he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a thick stack of cash, and throws it at Mia with pure disgust. Here is $10,000. It is enough to buy a new car and keep your mouth shut forever. Let's act like we never met. Mia stands frozen, looking at the money scattered in the dirty water. Her heart aches, not from fear, but from the deep pain of being insulted. She looks into the billionaire's empty eyes, seeing only the arrogance of a man who believes every mistake has a price tag. Do not use this paper to hide your crime, she says, her voice low but shaking with strength. You might be rich, but your character is not worth a penny if you think a human life is a game. Arthur laughs, a dry and cruel sound from a man who has never been told no. You want to be a hero. In this city, nobody cares about the pride of a poor Uber driver, but Mia does not back down. She slowly takes out her phone and starts filming, her eyes glowing with the light of justice. I may not have money, but I have the truth, and the truth does not live in your pocket. In that moment, the expensive cash lies silent under the rain, becoming completely worthless next to a woman who is brave enough to say no to a cruel bribe. This fight is no longer about two cars. It is a war between a broken soul and a strong heart in an America full of unfairness. Arthur stands there, paralyzed by a feeling he has never felt before, a strange sense of smallness. For the first time in his life, his golden key does not fit the lock, and the silence of the night feels heavier than his fortune. He looks at Mia, really looks at her, and realizes that his power ends where her dignity begins. The rain continues to pour, washing away the ego of a man who thought he could buy the world, while a simple driver stands her ground as the most powerful person on that street. This is not just an accident, it is the moment a legacy starts to burn. The next morning, with the alcohol gone but his ego still bruised, Arthur finds Mia at her crowded apartment with a cruel offer. He steps out of his shiny car, his expensive leather shoes treading on the dirty ground, and hands her a private driving contract. The pay is unbelievable, but the terms are designed to crush her dignity. I want you to be my driver for 1 month, he says with a smirk. I want to see how long that pride you worship will last against the power of my dollars. Arthur is certain that with enough money, anyone will eventually kneel, and he wants to watch Mia break, just like everyone else. Mia stands frozen in her tiny room. The smell of medicine from her mother's hospital bills on the table acts as a brutal reminder of her reality. Her mother needs an emergency surgery, and the cost is a mountain she could never climb in a lifetime of driving Uber. Her heart aches. Every line in the contract feels like a knife cutting into the pride she has guarded so carefully. I agree, she says, her voice thick with emotion, but her eyes burning with resolve. But I am selling my time and my driving skills, not my honor. Arthur nods in triumph. He does not care about her words. To him, the game has already started, and the result is already decided by his wealth. In the days that follow, Mia endures mental torture, impossible demands, and sharp insults from Arthur inside the tight space of the car. He tosses leftover food at her, makes her wait for hours in the burning sun, or purposely soils the floor to make her kneel and clean it. Every time, Arthur watches her through the rearview mirror, searching for a crack, a plea for mercy, or a greedy look at the large cash bonuses he leaves out in the open. But Mia remains silent. She swallows her tears, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turn white. She endures it all for the mother lying in a hospital bed. This contract is not just an exchange of money for work. It is a bitter test between the greed of the rich and the pain of the poor. Amidst the luxury streets of America, two people from different worlds are tied together by a painful, invisible string. Arthur believes he is winning, but he does not know that he is the one truly trapped in the darkness of his own arrogance. Every day, the luxury Bentley is no longer a symbol of pride, but a cruel lens through which Mia sees into the hollow soul of the New York elite. Behind the sharp suits and extravagant parties is a world of lies, where people are ready to stab each other in the back for a number dancing on a Wall Street screen. Mia quietly watches Arthur through the rearview mirror. She sees a man who seems to have the world in his hands, but actually has no one true to him. His phone calls start to fill with sharp arguments, financial loss reports, and anxiety hidden behind his usual arrogant mask. The dramatic twist begins late one afternoon when Mia accidentally overhears a secret conversation between Arthur's fiancée and his most trusted partner right in the back seat of the car, while they assume she is just a mindless puppet for hire. They are whispering about a plan to freeze all of Arthur's personal accounts and leak sensitive financial files to the FBI to steal his CEO position during the next shareholders' meeting. Arthur, who always believed money could buy absolute loyalty, has no idea his loved ones are preparing a fatal strike to his heart. This betrayal is the first deep crack in his glamorous empire, a brutal reality of American society where profit always stands above human connection. Mia looks at Arthur through the mirror, and her previous feeling of disgust is slowly replaced by a strange, aching pity. She realizes this billionaire is actually the poorest person she has ever met, because he doesn't have a single sincere friend to lean on during a storm. When Arthur yells at her over a small mistake, Mia stays silent, knowing that the coming storm will wipe away everything he worships and protects. In the dark shadows of the Manhattan skyscrapers, betrayal grows like a tumor, waiting for the right moment to explode and crush everything. Arthur is still obsessed with his power games and phantom numbers, unaware that the bottomless greed he used to test Mia is now turning back to swallow him whole. He still orders people around arrogantly, still looks down on the working class, not knowing his golden throne is shaking violently. This moment marks a major turning point in the lives of these two people, as the line between the winner and the loser begins to blur before the harsh truth of human nature and the price of fame. The sun rose over New York that day in a metallic grey, signaling the final collapse of a kingdom. Arthur had just stepped into his top-floor office when police sirens screamed from below, tearing through the quiet of the financial district. Dozens of FBI agents rushed in like a flood, guns drawn and cold search warrants issued, leaving Arthur in total shock. Everything happened so fast he couldn't even process it, until his most trusted lawyer avoided his gaze. Every account was frozen, personal assets sealed, and his powerful CEO chair was now nothing but a heap of ruins. Arthur frantically called his fiancée, the only person he hoped could help save his last bit of capital. But the other end was only long, hopeless rings, then silence in the cruel stillness of Wall Street. The drama hit its peak when Mia drove Arthur back to his penthouse, only to find it sealed. His beautiful fiancée had emptied the safe and vanished with the traitorous partner on a private jet the night before. Arthur stood paralyzed in the lobby. The man who just yesterday held the fate of thousands of employees now didn't even have a spare dime for parking. The pain of being betrayed by those he trusted most, those he once used money to buy loyalty from, was more agonizing than any financial sentence. He screamed in vain, slamming his fist against the polished glass of the building, but New York has no room for pity for those who have fallen. Mia stood there, witnessing this horrific collapse with an indescribable heartache. She saw Arthur not as the arrogant billionaire anymore, but as a child lost amidst the ashes of fame. He stood amidst the rushing crowds on Broadway, people he once never bothered to look at, who now walked past him like a shadow. No driver, no bodyguards. Arthur suddenly realized how small and vulnerable he was against the fierce turning of fate. The cracks that had been forming were now completely shattered, revealing a hollow and utterly lonely soul of a man who believed too much in the power of money. This collapse is a costly lesson of American society, where glory can vanish in the blink of an eye, leaving a person bare with their true self. Arthur collapsed on the sidewalk, watching magazines with his face on them blowing in the wind like a bitter irony of a lost golden age. For the first time in his life, the man who once looked down on everyone understood what it truly meant to be penniless, without family, without friends, and without a place to call home. Night falls over New York, but there is no warm glow from a luxury penthouse to welcome Arthur anymore. Instead, there is only the biting cold of the wind whistling through the skyscrapers, where he is now nothing more than a homeless man. Arthur wanders the streets he once owned, his expensive leather shoes now torn and soaked in foul sewer water. He tries to reach out to the friends who once raised glasses with him at high society parties, those who swore to stand by him until the end of the world. But the only response is doors slamming shut, eyes filled with contempt through the cracks, and bitter insults saying they don't know a financial criminal. An old close friend even throws a few spare coins at him through a window as a final insult, shattering Arthur's pride into tiny pieces. With nowhere else to go, Arthur has to find a dark corner in Central Park, huddling on a hard wooden bench under the damp mist. His $1,000 designer vest is now a tattered blanket that can't keep him warm, while his stomach cramps with a hunger he has never known before. The rustle of leaves and the footsteps of other wanderers make him shiver with fear as a sense of loneliness and abandonment surrounds his hollow soul. In the darkness of the park, Arthur looks up at the glowing skyscrapers in the distance, where he was once part of that glory, and sobs uncontrollably like a child. The price of collapse is not just the loss of money, but the sudden disappearance of respect from those around him. He looks at his hands that have never had to do heavy labor, now trembling from the bone-chilling cold of a New York winter. Morning joggers pass him with avoidant eyes, treating him like a stain on the city's beautiful landscape. Arthur suddenly realizes that in the world he once worshipped, people are only valued based on the assets they own. When that number returns to zero, he becomes invisible. He tries to sleep, but every car horn makes him jump, fearing that even this park bench will be taken away. The contempt of American society toward those who have fallen is brutal. They cheer when you are at the top, but are ready to trample you when you hit the mud. Arthur realizes that relationships built on money are just ghosts that vanish when the light of wealth goes out. His first night sleeping outside is a torture for both body and mind, forcing him to face his true self without any luxury items to hide behind. In the terrifying silence of the deep night, Arthur feels smaller than ever, a nameless speck of dust in the heart of a cruel New York that never sleeps. On the dawn of the third day after his collapse, Arthur lay slumped on the sidewalk near a subway station, his face gaunt and his hollow eyes watching the rushing crowd. A high fever and clawing hunger had stripped away the last of the billionaire's pride. Just as he thought he would vanish into the indifference of New York, a familiar figure appeared. Mia stood there, still in her simple driving uniform, looking at him with eyes no longer filled with contempt, but with deep compassion. Without a single word of mockery, she leaned down, took Arthur's trembling arm, and helped him into her old sedan. She drove him away from the glittering skyscrapers, deep into the slums of the Bronx, where the sound of rap music mixed with car horns and the heavy scent of cheap food filled the air. Mia's apartment was cramped and old, but filled with warmth, a luxury Arthur had never felt in his cold penthouse. Mia placed a $1 sandwich from a street cart on a scratched wooden table. "Eat," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Here, this is how we survive." Arthur stared at the cheap bread, something he once wouldn't have even glanced at, then slowly brought it to his mouth. The salty taste of the minced meat and the dryness of the crust made him choke, as tears fell onto his grimy hands. For the first time, he understood the true value of a meal when a person is truly hungry, and that kindness doesn't require million-dollar checks. Mia taught him how to stretch the little money they had, how to wash his expensive suit by hand to keep the last bit of his dignity, and how to look into the eyes of the working poor as real human beings. Arthur learned to eat that $1 bread not as a humiliation, but as a lesson in humility. In the shadows of the slums, where American society seemed to have forgotten, Arthur began to find the first pieces of his soul that had been lost for so long. He realized that the hand of the girl he once despised was now the only lifebuoy in a stormy sea. A billionaire who once wanted to trap others in greed was now bowing his head to learn how to live again through the simplest things. In the following days, Arthur took off his worn-out suit to put on the bright safety vest of New York's freelance laborers. He followed Mia to busy warehouses on the outskirts, where massive crates had to be unloaded in the bone-chilling cold for just a few $dozen. His hands, once used only to sign billion-dollar contracts, were now swollen and bleeding from the sharp edges of cardboard boxes. Arthur learned to stay silent when the foreman yelled and learned to work in rhythm with immigrant workers who had no idea who he was. For the first time in his life, he didn't use money to command or manipulate, but used his own honest labor to earn a silent yet solid respect. When he sat exhausted on the dirty cement floor after a 10-hour shift, a co-worker handed him a cold bottle of water with a kind smile, a selfless act of sharing he had never found at the luxury wine parties of Wall Street. He began to realize a profound and new human lesson. A person's worth is not found in their bank balance or gold-plated business cards, but in the weight of the sweat they pour and how they treat one another when everyone has nothing in their hands. In the mud of the poorest working-class districts, Arthur saw people willing to share half a dry sandwich or give up a thin blanket during a freezing winter night. Acts that the ultra-rich he once belonged to, often called foolish and meaningless, were now the purest light saving his soul from darkness. The pure kindness of Mia and the low-income workers taught him that fame is as fleeting as smoke, but compassion and empathy are the only eternal values. He understood a completely different truth of life. True happiness is not about how many people serve you or kneel at your feet, but about what you can contribute to this life, even if it is the smallest help. The scars and calluses on his hands were no longer a source of shame, but a noble testament to a heart that had truly been reborn, beginning to beat again with the rhythm of humanity and the breath of life. Arthur no longer looked at the world through cold numbers. He looked at it through eyes, handshakes, and silent sacrifices in the heart of an America, full of injustice yet still sparkling with love. When news spread that shareholders and the old leadership were planning to blame all financial fraud on lower-level employees to save themselves, Arthur faced a choice that would change his destiny forever. He looked at his calloused hands, proof of his days of honest labor, then at Mia, the woman who had saved him from the mud of despair. He knew he could no longer stay silent and let innocent workers, who had families and worries just like Mia, suffer for the mistakes he once allowed. In a firm decision, Arthur put back on his old suit, cleaned and ironed by Mia, not to show off power, but to face his past with a final act of kindness and courage. He walked into the New York police headquarters with the head-high posture of a man who found his soul, ready to tell the whole truth to protect the rights of thousands of his former employees. Before the cold iron prison doors closed, Arthur grabbed Mia's thin but warm hand through the bars. His eyes were no longer filled with fear, regret, or resentment toward fate, but with a strange peace of a man truly free from the chains of bottomless greed. "I am going to pay for my past, to be truly worthy of the $1 bread and the love you gave me," Arthur whispered, his voice thick with emotion but full of resolve. Mia looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks but her smile bright with faith. She promised to always be here in the old sedan tied to so many memories, waiting for the day of his return. This redemption was not just a heavy legal sentence, but a brilliant victory of humanity over the cruel temptation of power and money. Arthur stepped into the darkness of the cell with a heart full of light, knowing he had finally learned how to be a real human being, one who takes responsibility for his actions. He realized that true freedom is not about owning penthouses or being able to go anywhere you want, but about the absolute peace in your soul when doing what is right for others. This journey from a hollow billionaire, falling to the mud and rising through sacrifice, had turned him into a man of high character, ready to trade all illusory glory to protect justice and keep his dignity intact. 3 years passed, and the heavy iron gates of the federal prison slowly opened, welcoming Arthur back to the world with the brightest and clearest dawn he had ever seen in his life. No more custom-made luxury suits. No more million-dollar watches sparkling on his wrist. He walked out with a simple canvas bag, his hair graying but his eyes shining with a soul surprisingly at peace. Across the street, amidst the rushing and noisy New York traffic, Mia's old sedan was still there, as steady and loyal as her firm promise from years ago. The moment Arthur saw Mia's radiant smile through the misty car window, he understood he was not penniless as the world thought. He possessed the most priceless asset that money or power could never touch: sincere love and a chance to start life over. They didn't drive toward the cold glass towers of Manhattan, but toward the peaceful outskirts, where the warm morning sunlight embraced the long road ahead. Arthur's story is a living testament to a profound human lesson about worth. True wealth is not measured by the digits in a bank account or empty titles, but by the footprints of kindness and integrity we leave on life's journey. Sometimes, fate forces us to lose all illusory glory and pushes us to the very bottom of the mud just so we can find our true essence. We realize that happiness does not lie at the peak of dominance, but in the peace of the soul, in a firm handshake during hard times, and in the selfless sharing between human beings. Do not let greed and arrogance blind you, because in the end, the only thing that saves us through the brutal storms of fate is our character and compassion. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this emotional story of collapse and miraculous rebirth. We hope Arthur and Mia's journey has strengthened your faith in the good values that always exist around us. If this lesson touched your heart and gave you a new perspective on life, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to join us on our next humanitarian journeys. Let's spread love and kindness together, because every one of us deserves a brilliant new dawn in our lives. Wishing you a peaceful day.